third graders. I'm back with another chapter, chapter 17, A Certain Guest. And I sure do miss you. I wish I could be reading this to you in person. Anyway, here we go. Xanthippus was as amazed as the boys when he heard the identity of the man who had sent the courier. Many years ago, ex-consul Tellus had been a famous general who defeated the Persians and the Armenians and half a dozen other Oriental tribes. After a number of campaigns, he had returned home a hero, and with the millions he had gained in booty, retired to private life. Since then, his fame had somewhat faded, but he kept some sort of reputation alive by the expensive parties he gave in his huge palace in the gardens of Lucilius. Nevertheless, he was not popular. He was feared for his malicious tongue and for his tremendous influence in social life and politics. He was a close friend of all the highest dignitaries, and it was said that the emperor himself had great faith in Tellus and told him all his plans. Xanthippus sat in his room, surrounded by books, papers, compasses, rulers, and other geometrical instruments. "Tellus?" he said, placing his injured leg on a hassock. "Tellus? This certainly is a surprise. Of course, it beautifully confirms my theory about an important personage, but to tell the truth, I hadn't counted on anyone quite that important." "Well, if it's so, it's so. We must not be put off by this. Let us consider this turn of events with cool heads, my young friends." The boys grinned, flattered. This was the first time Xanthippus had ever offered to discuss the subject with the boys on a basis of equality. "It seems unlikely that Tellus has any connection with the crime," Xanthippus said. "What reason would an ex-consul have for engineering a crime to throw suspicion upon young Rufus?" Antonius spoke up. "Maybe he was envious because Rufus's father had just won such a great victory over the Gauls. Generals are always jealous of each other. Pompey wanted to kill Caesar, and Caesar wanted to kill, actually it's Pompey, and afterwards Brutus killed Caesar, and Antony killed Brutus, and my father knew a general who even killed himself because he was mad when another general won a battle." "That's enough," Xanthippus interrupted him. "You can tell us about that during the history lesson. It's quite true that jealousy and envy will drive people to the most illogical actions, but Tellus himself was so successful a general that he does not have to begrudge his colleagues Praetonius a victory. Besides, at the time of the defacing of the temple, nobody in Rome knew anything about the victory. Otherwise, the news of it would have appeared in the morning newspaper. So the culprit must have had other motives. And for that reason, I scarcely believe it was Tellus. A little reasoning should make that clearer. Tellus is a person who lives only for his pleasure, and it is no pleasure to steal through the dark streets of Rome at night, knock out harmless teachers, rob them, then smear up sacred buildings. Tellus can afford amusements of another sort. Furthermore, Tellus is a friend and intimate of the emperor. He would certainly think twice about risking this position of trust he now occupies, for he of all people would know that the emperor does not take kindly to such jokes. And finally, how could Tellus have known that Caius and Rufus quarreled and that Rufus's writing tablet was here at school? Shall I presume that one of you ran off to him and told him about it? "No, no," the boys protested. Xanthippus tugged at his pointed beard. "Well, then you see it cannot have been Tellus." "Hypothesis," Publius murmured in a low voice. Fortunately, Xanthippus did not hear him. "We will now consider the situation in another light," he continued. "Tellus sent the courier. There is no doubt about that. Nobody would dare to misuse the name of the mighty ex-consul, but Tellus may well have acted as the unsuspecting agent for the real culprit. A person living the way he does has many hangers-on. It is well known that he is a great admirer of actors, dancers, acrobats, and other such characters. Now, I happen to know that the night of the desecration of the temple, Tellus gave one of his disgusting feasts. There is therefore the following possibility. One of his guests may have started the rumor of the desecration of the temple and have persuaded Tellus to send the courier to the newspaper. He would have known that Tellus, as a friend of the emperor, would feel bound to make such a fuss. The man lied, of course, for the temple had not yet been defaced. But then later, he must have secretly slipped away from the banquet in order to commit the crime. Possibly, he had had no chance to do it before. But he also wanted to cast suspicion on Rufus right from the start and therefore persuade Tellus to send the report on to the newspaper before the censor's office closed. Our next task is therefore, who was this guest? Publius spoke up. Tellus's parties are always so large that we might just as well look for the criminal in the forum. Sarcasm gets us nowhere, Xanthippus reproved him. You are only trying to make up by impudence for lack of intelligence. I know that Tellus's parties are very large, but the guests we are looking for will certainly have distinguishing marks. For one thing, the route between his home and the palace of Tellus must have run by the temple of Minerva, otherwise he could not claim to have discovered the alleged desecration of the temple. When a man tells a lie like that, he must take care to make it plausible. But it was dark then. How could he have seen anything? Caius asked. A rich man out at night is accompanied by many slaves with torches and lanterns, Xanthippus said, and Tellus's guests are all rich. Naturally, there was nothing written on the temple at the time he passed, since he did it later himself later on. The slaves also saw nothing, but then they probably knew nothing about his lie to ex-consul Tellus. Xanthippus got up and hobbled over to a map of Rome which hung on the wall. Now look, he said, to grasp the significance of all this, you must follow me closely. Tellus's palace is over here in the gardens of Lucullus. Tellus's guests are high dignitaries, and almost all of them live near the imperial palace on the Palatine Hill. Their route, as you can see, leads directly across the Forum, past the Capitol, and along Broad Street to the gardens of Lucullus. Nobody would take the foolish roundabout route uphill and down across the Esquiline Hill, especially not at night. Guests who live on the Viminalis or the Quirinalis are ruled out at the start, since the Temple of Minerva is in the opposite direction. Therefore, the question narrows down to those who live on the Esquiline Hill itself. But even at that, the Temple of Minerva is so out of the way that only 2 or 3 of them could possibly pass it. We can therefore confine our attention to a very small number of persons. Xanthippus limped back to his easy chair and sat down. The boys were much impressed by this exposition, but they did not know how to go on from there. What if the guest himself did not do it, but ordered one of his slaves to? Julius suggested. Xanthippus shook his head. That is practically out of the question, he said. You know all the proverb. The most dangerous part of a slave is his tongue. No rich man would entrust a slave with an important secret unless he could not help himself. He would be too afraid of the slave's talking or using blackmail. A rich man has to commit his own crimes if he wants to sleep peacefully. This, too, struck the boys as sound reasoning. But how were they ever going to pin the blame on a mysterious guest for all that Xanthippus had so cleverly narrowed a circle around him? There still were a great many people living in the vicinity of the Temple Minerva. The boys could not very well go from door to door asking, "Excuse me, excuse us, please, are you the man who wrote Caius is a dumbbell on the temple wall?" "Why don't we just go to Tellus and ask him?" Mucius proposed. But Xanthippus was opposed to that. That wouldn't help us at all and might even lead to trouble, he said. Tellus is friends with everybody who counts. He would not want to offend anyone and therefore answer no questions. Tellus is a politician, and in politics, one hand washes the other. "We won't find the other man then," Julius said, losing heart. "All we can do is ask the help of the gods. We ought to bring them a sacrifice." "Well now, there's no use running to unnecessary expense," Xanthippus countered. "The gods can help those who help themselves. For the present, we can try another plan, and I happen to know another fact about Tellus which will be useful to us. Although Tellus gives us the impression of caring for nothing but pleasure, he is really always looking out for his personal future. A politician never knows whether he may not fall into disgrace one day, and at such times it is well to have old friends to depend on. But when things are going badly for a man, old friends have a way of forgetting their friendship. Tellus is cunning. He has a sort of guest book and asks all of his guests to sign their names in it. Naturally, each of them feels honored when the rich and famous ex-consul makes such a request. But Tellus's guest book is not just an ordinary scroll, which might be lost or destroyed. It is a white marble wall in the great hall of his palace. Tellus has a special red paint made which is not washable, and the guests paint their names on the wall with a brush. Over each list of names is placed the date of the feast at which the guests were present. That is very handy for us, since the name of the guest we are interested in will be under the 20th of March. But how can we get a look at this guest list? Mucius asked. I have a plan in mind, Xanthippus replied, but it hinges on someone's being able to commit to memory all the names. There may have been 15, 20, or even more guests at this affair. Which of you has a good memory? Me, Antonius burst out. I have a terrific memory. I could even remember when I lay in my cradle. It was awful. I couldn't talk yet. All I could say was father and mother. It made me so mad I cried all the time. That is not any special feat of memory, Xanthippus said dryly. I too remember lying in the cradle. The boys broke out into peals of laughter. There was something irresistibly funny about the idea of Xanthippus ever having been a baby. Quiet, Xanthippus snapped. If you want to laugh, do it at home or in the streets. I will not have laughter in my presence. And Julius spoke up. Antonius really does have a good memory. He only has to read something once and he knows it by heart. If that is so, why doesn't he never know his list of Greek words? Xanthippus commented. That's because he never looks at them, Caius murmured. Are all of you of the opinion that Antonius has the best memory among all of you? Xanthippus asked. Yes, the boys agreed, Antonius joining the chorus. All right then, Xanthippus said, not very enthusiastically. Well, we have no choice. We must send him to Tellus. Me? Antonius cried, overwhelmed. You are to take him a letter from me, Xanthippus said. A few years ago, I did some historical research for Tellus so that he knows me. I will write him and ask him to put in a good word for Rufus with the emperor. He will toss my petition into his wastebasket unread, but that does not matter. You take the letter to the palace and say you are to wait for the answer. Here are 10 sesterces. Give them to the doorkeeper so that he will let you in. He will lead you to a great hall where the marble wall with the list of names is, and while the letter is being taken to Tellus, you are waiting for the reply, you will have time enough to look for the names underneath the 20th of March and to learn them by heart. But then, hurry straight back here and don't linger on the way. When we have the names, we will know where the people live, and it will be easy to find the man we want. Xanthippus hastily wrote a few lines on the parchment paper, rolled it up, and gave it to Antonius. All right, be off with you. You should be back within an hour in the latest. I'll be back a lot sooner than that, Antonius said, and scooted out the door. Why can't we all go? Mucius asked in disappointment. More than one would make for awkwardness, Xanthippus said. Besides, you could only distract Antonius. He must be free to concentrate completely on the names. So now we have to sit around and wait here for an hour and do nothing? Caius said grumpily. I should think not, Xanthippus snapped. As long as you are here, you may just as well learn something. Where, by the way, is the homework I assigned you? Homework? Caius asked, pretending innocence. You were supposed to write out the Greek words in fair hand 10 times. Oh, that, Caius mumbled. I was sick. So you were sick, were you? Xanthippus mimicked. Too bad. You were looking very well today. Here's a tablet and a stylus. Go into the schoolroom and get to work. And you others, you can each take a volume of Sallust from my shelf over there and study a little Roman history. The boys picked out the books, went into the classroom, and sat down on the benches. Caius stared unhappily down at his writing tablet. He no longer had the slightest idea what Greek words he was supposed to write. The others were not in a very industrious mood either. They never liked Sallust anyway, and their minds were on Antonius. What a shame, each boy was thinking, that it was Antonius who had the best memory and not himself. So that's the end of chapter 17. I wonder what he'll find out. Chapter 18 is called A Banquet, and I will read that for you tomorrow. Let's see, there are 22 chapters in our book. Yeah, 22. So we're getting close. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.